Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and thank you very much for tuning into these live broadcasts on the Car Dealer YouTube channel, where we talk to people and key businesses right across the industry. Now, on today's show, we've got the Institute of the Motor Industry on the show, or IMI for short. Somehow it's taken us 95 shows to actually get round to talking to the IMI, but thank goodness they're on today. Now, it's an organisation that really doesn't need much introduction whatsoever, so I'll keep it brief. Founded in 1920, the IMI was set up to establish and promote new skills and knowledge in the car industry. Back then, it was established when the motor car was in a huge period of change, and 100 years on, the same can be said for the car and the industry itself. And joining me now is CEO Steve Nash. Hello, Steve.
Hi, James. Good to join you.
Lovely to have you on.
How did it take that long?
Yeah. Well, it's good to finally get you on, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Now, Steve himself has been at the IMI for 7 years, and before that he was BMW Group, a company he was with for over 26 years. So he definitely knows the industry inside out. We're going to be on the air for the next 20 minutes or so. If you've got a question you want to ask Steve, then please do drop it into the comments box and I'll do my best to put it to him, but we'll start with mine. So Steve, where do we start? 2020, how has life been at the IMI during 2020? Probably, much like everybody watching this show, it's been pretty turbulent.
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly didn't start the year expecting it to kind of progress the way it has, did we? So quarter one was actually not too bad, you know. But I think that none of us were prepared, were we, for what's happened with the coronavirus. Having said that, you know, I mean, in all the years I've been in business, and I mean, you mentioned my long career with BMW, but I mean, I worked at a couple of other places before that. You know, worked in retail as well. We always used to have these, well, we variously call them disaster recovery or business recovery plans, you know. This time round, we've actually put them into practice, you know. So we, as the IMI, I mean, we're sort of located out near Hertford, in a little bit remote. And if the weather turns bad, if it snows or something, it's not the easiest place to get to. So we've always had to be prepared to let people work from home. And I've got to say, we were able to, our plan worked like clockwork. I mean, so we were able to get our team working from home, the entire team, within a week, you know, of the sort of first announcements of lockdown. And that's how we remain at the moment. We've just reopened our offices, but for limited use at the moment. And, you know, we've been busy throughout, actually.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I mean, really, I think it's fair to say the car industry has been pretty much paralysed by coronavirus in some sectors, particularly the manufacturing sector, because of course car factories had to close down for a period of time. But the motor trade itself, I mean, it's really had to adapt fast. Perfect example being online car sales, for example. I think the motor trade has long been accused of being behind the times a little bit compared to lots of other industries. Do you think it's now caught up with other industries, or do you think there's still some work to be done?
I wouldn't say it's caught up, but I mean, I think, you know, you've only got the biggest winner, or one of, apart from Zoom, you know, the biggest winner of out of this crisis has been Amazon, hasn't it? And you know, you hear this term used now, Amazonization. You know, the Amazonization of everything, and it kind of is the benchmark, isn't it? And if that is the benchmark, then we're a hell of a long way behind it. But I mean, there's no question that what was happening, I mean, it was certainly a movement within our industry has accelerated as a result. So those who were pretty well set up to sell online at the beginning of this crisis were clearly better off. I mean, tangibly better off than those who weren't in that position. And I think anybody who hasn't now realized the essential, you know, the necessity of having a good online offer would be crazy. So I think, you know, as we hear a lot in the media, there's a great many things have taken a sort of an accelerated path during this period. And I think there are in train some pretty profound changes to the whole model, actually. The whole distribution model probably, has kind of taken a shift.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, they were at home during lockdown. You could order books via Amazon. You could get your groceries delivered by Sainsbury's. And then, of course, I think people, the number of used car searches rose dramatically. The same with new car searches as well. And people started to realize that perhaps you can actually buy your car online. But the proportion of people doing that is still very, very small, isn't it? So, I think you're right. You're saying that the motor industry still hasn't quite caught up, and that's partly because customers still aren't quite ready to grapple with buying a car online, are they?
It's interesting because I was only having this conversation with a dealer yesterday, because I've actually just bought a new car online. Now, you could argue that I'm not a typical customer, so I knew the product very well. I didn't really need anybody to explain it to me, so I kind of knew what I wanted. It was a pretty straightforward transaction. But the chap that the sales chap that I was talking to, he was saying that there's a growing number of people who kind of pretty much buy the same thing, who are more than happy to transact online. It's different though when you're shopping around or when you need somebody to explain to you what the product's all about. And I think that's more of a challenge when the products are changing so much. So when you start to introduce electrification and that kind of thing, that's something that, unless you've experienced it, perhaps you need a bit more, people are a bit less willing to jump in with both feet before they've actually gone and looked and touched and felt the thing.
Yeah. And how did you find the online experience? Was it, I suppose, because you're in the motor industry, you know what you're doing, but do you think that if more people it's going to entice more people to actually buy online because it's such a simple transaction?
I think some of the things that we've considered virtues in the past may be less of a virtue going forward. So in my long career with BMW, I mean, we were one of the first manufacturers to offer this almost limitless list of options you could put on a car. And we used to boast about the fact that no two cars that came off the production. It was amazing to watch cars coming down the production line, and everyone would be different, different versions of the model and different wheels and upholstery and everything. And that's great, but it's very complicated to offer online. And even as somebody who worked with the brand for a long time, is still pretty close to the brand, I find a lot of the packages and things quite you need somebody to tell you what they are, and if I have that package, does it mean I don't need to order that, and all this kind of thing. But I think that we think almost because of other reasons, if you consider WLTP now, and you think that actually quite a lot of the options on the list now have a kind of taxable value, don't they? Based on emissions. I think we might see a move back towards more packaged vehicles, a sort of a sport model, a luxury model, that kind of thing. If that happens and you get a simplified offer, I think it becomes easier to buy online, because you can say, well, I like the sport model because it's got everything I like on it. You know what I mean? I think there are other changes that need to happen to kind of facilitate it, to make it easier for people to confidently buy. But I think it's an inexorable trend, though.
I think you've hit on an interesting point there about personalization of cars, because brands like Mini have long traded on that. But I think Mini themselves, that's why they offer so many special editions with all the option packs ticked, because research shows that buyers are actually overwhelmed by personalization, and they'd much rather just have a straightforward car, really. And especially for manufacturers, the overheads of having so many different types of cars rolling down the production lines is a big headache for them. So at
the risk of offending a few people, I don't think any manufacturer has got an exemplary site, if I'm honest with you. And I talk as somebody with 43 years worth of knowledge in the industry. I know bloody cars inside out. And yet I can still get confused when I go on and look and try and spec a model and understand what's what. You know, all of the online configurators and stuff are all great, but they have severe limitations on them. So there needs to be a bit of a sea change to, if online selling is what we aspire to, and that's an open question, of course, isn't it? I don't for one nanosecond think it spells the death of the dealer, because I think the dealers still have an incredibly important role to play, because, you know, I'm not going to use the old argument that it's the second biggest purchase we make in our life, because it isn't anymore, is it? It's a monthly payment now. But nevertheless, it's something that we're more emotional about than a fridge or other consumer durables. So we do want to kind of get engaged with it, and I think dealers still play an incredible, whether in the long term that becomes a sort of an agency type thing or whatever, we'll see. But you know.
Yeah, I think, and it's not just you; it's journalists such as myself. I like to think I know my way around a car configuration and a car brochure, and yet I get completely and utterly confused by the number of option packs. But I think you also make an interesting point there as well about cars still being an emotive thing, and people still want to experience it, don't they? Because with a fridge, you're willing to go on John Lewis and check out the reviews and believe and make an informed choice from reviews. Some are good, some are bad. Okay, well, I'll go for the Indesit, for example, or the whatever. Whereas with a car, people are they want to come to their own decision about it, don't they? They don't actually want to trust an online review. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and long may that be the case, because I'm a passionate sort of supporter of dealers. I think that they have an incredibly important role to play in that in the customer relationship. Developing the relationships and maintaining the relationships. So I think that whatever the future looks like, and there's lots of, and again, I think probably. It would be good to see more manufacturers coming a bit cleaner about what the future looks like, because there's one or two. I think Volkswagen have kind of offered up some ideas about what the future might look like, a kind of agency type model, and they're clearly going that route with some of their electrified vehicles going forward. They direct selling and so on, and with the dealer taking the handling charge or whatever. And I just think it's for the networks to understand what the future looks like is important.
Yeah. Let's just look at the industry at a wider level, not just the motor trade. Obviously, the IMI is a big supporter and advocate of apprenticeships and skills. How is that at the moment? Do you think there's enough people coming into the industry with the right skills, and do you think the industry is giving the right people the right skills?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In general terms, the answer is no. There aren't enough people coming into the industry. So again, look, I absolutely understand. It's not, coronavirus in itself is unique, but but you go back to 2008. We were in a huge crash. You can think of other times, I think around about the turn of the century, 1990, Black Wednesday and all the rest of it. So I've seen this lots of times in my career, and it's a depressingly familiar cycle but I'm not blaming anybody for that. It's not a judgment on anybody. Look, we understand that it's a coin operated business, and you've got to make the week to make the month to make the quarter to make the year, and so survival is the first instinct. And at the moment, a few businesses are in that unfortunate position of having to throw a few passengers out to keep the balloon afloat. You know what I mean? So right now, recruitment is not on the agenda. Apprenticeships overall have taken a hit. So across all industries, they're just almost 60% down. In automotive, they're 87% down. And this is at a time when we're looking at some profound changes in technology, and we know that we need new talent coming through and new skills. So you know, there's never been a time in all my experience where I remember people saying, God, there are technicians falling off trees out there, you know, just picking one occupation. It's never happened, you know. The acuteness of the demand becomes a bit more or less depending on what cycle the industry is in. And at the moment, we're in a down cycle, and we know there are actually some people out there looking for work. There are some people who have unfortunately been made redundant or aren't going to come back off a furlough, but that won't last long. I mean, literally just before the lockdown, so in early March, my team had a meeting with the HR directors of the top sort of 10 or a dozen dealer groups. And the agenda was dominated by attraction and retention. How do we find people and how do we keep them? That was a week or two before the lockdown. You know, now obviously there has been this short-term change because of people, as I said, being made redundant and so on, but the underlying need is still there. And we aren't a sort of a net attractor of people as an industry. You know, I mean, it's all the research we've ever done over the years has shown that a surprisingly high number of people coming into our industry have connections, like a father, brother, uncle, neighbor that's in the industry. There aren't many people who find their way to the industry on their own, you know, and we are competing against, you know, all those other industries out there, some of which are seen as being sexier than ours, you know. So, you know, I understand. I mean, look, I've been working with those HR directors and I've been lobbying the government. Gillian Keegan's the skills and apprenticeships minister, and I've lobbied her directly. I've spoken to her directly and put the case to her that for the time being, for a period of 2 years, I've recommended that they not just for the motor industry, it have to be for all industries, but they stop clawing back the levy, because for the moment, you know, businesses have got to talk about survival, but seeing that money disappear is not helping them get back onto the whole apprentice recruitment thing. So if they can allow that money to accumulate until they've got a bit of stability back in the business, I think we'd see the numbers picking up again quite rapidly. I don't think we'll get an answer on that until the autumn statement. Certainly what the measures that the government put in place in the spring statement, the extra £2,000 for apprentices under 25, an extra £1,500 for above 25, has not really moved the needle much, as far as I can see. I think people are too busy with other things to actually even look at that, to be honest with you. But we'll be working with we've put out a lot of information under the kind of use it, don't lose it, because for the moment, you know, some of the big groups are seeing £50,000-60,000 a month disappear out of their levy accounts, you know, and we're sort of saying, until you get a decision from the government, let's find ways of using that constructively. Even if you don't need technicians at the moment, you are still training other people, and there might be more constructive ways of using that money.
Mm. Do you think there's the motor industry's got a bit of a reputational problem? Because, you know, you're just saying there that a lot of people are coming into the industry because they've got a connection. Do you think the motor industry is actually quite unappealing to a lot of people outside of the industry? Because it shouldn't be, really, because if we look at where it is at the moment, you know, it's a hugely exciting place to be at the moment, isn't it? You've got, you know, just scratching the surface, autonomous tech, you've got, you know, electrification, hydrogen cars, you know, a whole wealth of stuff that's to get excited about.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is unquestionably, there is no other product that's as sophisticated as a car, because if you take all of the most sophisticated computers and communication devices and they're all there, they're all packaged together in something that does, you know, 100 odd miles an hour and stops on the sixpence. So, you know, we are emphatically a high-tech industry, but we aren't promoted and marketed that way. I'm not saying the employers themselves don't endeavor to do that, but, you know, I mean, it's a hackneyed thing to say this, but, you know, our image is set by Phil Mitchell on EastEnders and the bloke on Coronation Street and Arthur Daly and so on. And, you know, to be honest, those stereotypes wouldn't exist unless they were reflected in real life to some extent, but that's a small part of the industry. I mean, there's this hugely professional, well-invested, incredible industry that you can be in that doesn't get reflected at all. And that, you know, collectively, we've got a big job on our hands, I think.
Yeah. I hate to bring the mood down a little bit, and I hate to use the B word after months of using the C word, which is of course coronavirus, but Brexit. Now it's been an interesting week, really, isn't it, with the UK negotiating with the EU, and I suppose behind all the bravado behind the EU and the UK, there are still concerns of how the UK motor industry is going to carry on trading with the EU, isn't there? And those concerns haven't been properly addressed, have they? They've been lingering in the background. What's the IMI's stance on all of this, and what's going through your heads at the moment?
Well, look, I mean, we're very, very supportive of the sort of stance that Mike Hawes and the guys at the SMMT, I think they've represented the industry well in this. The idea that we could go over to WTO terms and everything would be okay is a nonsense. It's a complete nonsense. I mean, we know what the effects of that would be in terms of tariffs and so on, and that would simply mean that some of, for a long time, the automotive industry was a darling of respective governments, as they often used to quote, look at this inward investment we're getting, and it's a net exporter, and all the rest. 80% of what we make plus goes abroad, and all the rest of it. And yet, it doesn't seem to be moving the needle at all in terms of their sentiments when it comes to this. I fear that the rhetoric at the moment, it just seems to be deja vu, doesn't it? We're back where we were with Michel Barnier, as hard as our side tried to be by saying we're perfectly okay with a no-deal Brexit. Michel Barnier is equally hard in his view that they won't move either. And I just get the feeling, I don't think it'd be good for either side, in all honesty, if we end up with no deal. You mentioned my time at BMW. We were always for a very long time, we were the second biggest export market. We obviously got overtaken by China, but BMW was an incredibly important export market for the likes of BMW and Mercedes and Audi. We buy a lot of luxury cars here. We like, and it would be a huge blow to those companies. But you'd like to think sense will prevail, but we haven't seen much of it yet, have we?
No. And I do think that the UK has actually got quite a strong position on this, simply on the count of the sheer talent that's here, really, isn't it? I mean, whether it's building fantastic cars in the here and now, or with R&D, with autonomous technology, battery technology for electric cars in the future. I mean, the UK has always been a hotbed of talent, hasn't it? So we are actually in quite a strong position.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that for so long, in that sort of post-war period where all of our big primary industries, the sort of coal, iron and steel and all the big sort of engineering-based stuff like shipbuilding was in decline, the invisible sectors, the finance sectors kind of took preeminence, didn't they? And we've sort of forgotten that you go back all the most fundamental pieces of engineering, whether it's trains or so much. We've got this fantastic heritage in engineering. We still have. I mean, Formula One wouldn't exist without the UK, would it? It's the very pinnacle of the industry. It's not like we're incapable. People forget that the internet was invented here. We do have great capability, and I mean the factories we have in this country making cars, whether they're making cars or engines or whatever, I guarantee they will all be in the top, in the top echelon of all the production plants for those particular manufacturers in terms of efficiency and productivity. So it would be a big loss to those manufacturers not to have that capacity. But I just hope we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, and it would be a massive loss to us as a nation if we don't have a viable manufacturing sector.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been a rocky ride so far in 2020. I think the last quarter of this year is also going to be pretty rocky as well. I just hope that we can all remain positive and actually get through all of this, because it's just going to be interesting to see what happens, really, isn't it? And what position we're going to be in at the beginning of 2021. But
yeah, it's interesting, James, and we've taken a pragmatic view. You know, we've looked at things like we were very, very lucky this year. I mean, our annual dinner took place less than a week before the lockdown, and it was very well attended. And I mean, because it's our centenary year, we'd set ourselves various targets like raising £100,000 for Ben. You may know I'm chairman of Ben, we actually, most of the things we plan to do, we haven't been able to do, but we did raise quite a lot of money at that dinner, which at least is something. But we've decided to bump our dinner for a year. So our next dinner would be next March. And rather than deal with the uncertainty, we'll probably take a year out. You know, but I know that there's a lot of people desperately still trying to get events off the ground, even between now and Christmas. But, you know, you just look at this latest situation and you realize that actually you're probably better planning beyond that, you know, and finding other ways to do things like this, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we had Ben on the show quite a couple of months ago, and, you know, it was very clear the frustration there that, new car sales may be down. We all may be suffering from this, but at the heart of all of this, Ben is trying to do a good job in supporting, you know, people who really need a lot of support. And of course, this year has been a big hit on their fundraising, and so it was very sort of disappointing to hear it.
Yeah. No, it has been a very challenging year, and of course, we're seeing the demands on their services going up and up and up, because as the furlough scheme winds out, more and more people kind of perhaps realise their fate in that situation. The demand for what they do, which is brilliant work, is going up and up and up. So, I mean, that's across the board with charities, but Ben's our charity, and unlike a lot of charities, because it's a dedicated industry charity, they can't stand on street corners and rattle a tin. No. You know, they can only work through us. So, but so I think we've got some continuing challenges really with this. It's just a reminder, isn't it? The announcement last night is a reminder this thing hasn't gone away, and we're probably going to have to deal with it for a good while yet. But I still remain positive, though. One of the things I love about this industry is its resilience. If you think about how dreadful things were in 2007, 2008, that we went into a bottomless pit. Nobody actually knew where we were going to land. But once we landed, the ability the industry had to claw its way out of that hole was incredible. I saw the same, back in. I still keep my mortgage letter from whenever it was back in 1990, or I think 90, when I got a letter saying your interest rate's gone up to 16.5%. Just to remind people that can happen. But again, we came out of that hole. That was probably sharper and shorter than most of the other depressions we've been through. But our industry is incredibly resilient, and you think we came out of the crash, and from about 2011 onwards, we had a series of record years. And we're still feeling some of the benefits of that, because after sales is still busy. That has a long tail on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I have every confidence in our ability to find our feet again, but I think the government could do more to help us. I think that they've done almost nothing, have they, really, to specifically help the car industry? And when you look at other countries around Europe and around the world, considerably more has been done. And I think, given how important the car industry is, I think we could expect at least to see some help with VAT or whatever it may be, but something.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a topic of much discussion on Car Dealer Lives and on our website, where people fall into two camps on this, really. On one camp, people are saying exactly what you're saying, and other people are saying the government's not going to support the car industry when, for instance, if you just look particularly at the new car market at the moment, it's hot. People want to buy cars. So why should the government actually, pull to one side the car industry and give that some support when other industries are really struggling? But it's a very interesting topic, isn't it? And it's one that's going to carry on throughout all of this year, really, isn't it? When is the government going to actually step in and give some support? it's going to be
Yeah.
fascinating to find out.
Yeah. Well, you know, as I say, it was already an exciting time before any of this happened, you know, and all of that stuff is carrying on inexorably, isn't it? The electrification and everything else, you know, I think, you know, it's like we've said, that's why I think it's a brilliant industry to join, you know, and quite evangelistic about it. But you know, we'll get back on the rails. I'm certain of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I share your positivity as well. I think we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, Steve, because I feel as though I could actually talk to you for the rest of the day, but I don't think anyone else wants us to. So thank you very much for coming on. Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Steve.
No, thank you. It's been good. Anytime.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Don't wait 95 shows next time.
We won't, I promise. Now, if you want to be on a Car Dealer Live just like this one and not wait 95 shows until coming on, then please do email me, james.batchelor@blackbullmedia.co.uk, or my colleague, James Baggett. He's available at james@blackbullmedia.co.uk. I'm back on Friday for another show, but until then, thank you very much indeed for watching, and bye-bye.